In this very second, while you are scrolling through your feed or adjusting your headphones, there is a silent vulnerability sitting deep inside the silicon of your computer that no software patch can ever truly fix. We like to believe that when a security flaw is discovered, a team of engineers at Microsoft, Apple, or Google stays up all night, writes some code, and pushes an update that makes us safe again. But the truth is much more unsettling. There is a category of exploits so fundamental, so deeply baked into the physical architecture of how processors work, that they are essentially permanent residents of our digital world. We are talking about flaws that exist in the very way electricity moves through a chip to make a logical decision. These aren't just bugs in a program. They are cracks in the foundation of modern computing itself. Today, we are deep diving into the most powerful exploits that still haven't been fixed, and in some cases, can never be fixed without discarding every piece of hardware we own. From the ghostly echoes of predictive execution to the physical manipulation of memory cells, we are uncovering the hidden backdoors that state-sponsored actors and elite hackers are using right now to bypass the security we trust the most. If you thought your BIOS password or your encrypted drive kept you safe, think again, because we are going to the level where the software ends and the raw, unyielding physics of the machine begins. To understand why some exploits are unfixable, we have to start with the most infamous duo in cybersecurity history, Spectre and Meltdown. When these were first revealed in early 2018, they sent a literal shiver through the entire tech industry. To explain why they are still a problem today, we have to look at how a CPU actually thinks. Modern processors are incredibly fast, but they are often waiting for data to arrive from the much slower RAM. To save time, CPUs use a technique called speculative execution. Essentially, the processor tries to guess which path a program will take next and starts executing those instructions in advance. If it guesses correctly, the computer feels lightning fast. If it guesses wrong, it simply discards the work and goes back to the right path. It sounds brilliant, right? The problem is that even when the CPU discards the wrong guess, it leaves a tiny microscopic trace of that data in the processor's cache. Spectre and Meltdown exploit this ghost data. By carefully timing how long it takes to access certain memory addresses, an attacker can reconstruct the information that was speculatively executed but supposedly deleted. This means a malicious program could read the memory of other programs, including your password manager, your browser cookies, or even the core of the operating system. Now here's the kicker. You can't just patch this with a simple update because this isn't a coding error. This is how the hardware was designed to achieve high performance. To truly fix it, you would have to disable speculative execution entirely, which would make your modern computer perform like a machine from the late 1990s. The fixes we have today are actually just digital bandages, workarounds that slow down the computer and try to make it harder to measure the timing, but the underlying vulnerability remains in billions of devices already in use. But if Spectre is a ghost, then Rowhammer is a physical assault. This is one of the most insane exploits ever discovered because it involves manipulating the physical properties of the hardware using software. Your computer's RAM is made up of millions of tiny capacitors that store bits as electrical charges. These capacitors are packed incredibly close together. Rowhammer researchers discovered that if you hammer a specific row of memory by rapidly accessing it millions of times per second, the electrical interference can cause the charge in the neighboring row to leak. This can flip a bit, changing a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 0, without the program ever having permission to touch that memory. Imagine you are in a high-security building with locked glass doors. You aren't allowed to touch the locks, but you find out that if you bang on the wall next to the door hard enough, the vibrations cause the lock to jiggle open. That is Rowhammer. An attacker can use this to flip bits in the operating system's kernel, granting themselves administrative privileges out of thin air. While manufacturers have tried to implement targeted row refresh to mitigate this, researchers keep finding new ways to bypass those protections, like the TR-respass and blacksmith attacks, because it is a result of the physical density of modern memory chips. As long as we keep making RAM smaller and faster, the hammering effect will likely always be a threat. While we are talking about hardware, we have to move to the shadow stack and the world of return-oriented programming, or ROP. For a long time, the biggest threat was a buffer overflow, sending too much data to a program so it spills over into the instruction space. We fixed that with something called data execution prevention, which tells the computer you can't run code from the part of memory meant for data. But hackers are clever. Instead of bringing their own new malicious code, they started using ROP. They look for tiny snippets of existing legitimate code already inside your computer, little pieces called gadgets, and they string them together to perform an action they weren't supposed to. It is like taking a book and cutting out individual words to paste together a ransom note. The industry responded with control flow integrity and hardware-based shadow stacks, but these are incredibly difficult to implement without breaking old software. There are millions of legacy applications running in power plants, banks, and government offices that simply cannot use these new protections. This creates a permanent landscape of known but unfixable targets. If an attacker can find a gadget in a common library like glibc or the Windows kernel, they can dance around almost any modern security layer. This is why you see so many zero-day exploits that seem to magically bypass everything. They aren't breaking the rules, they are using your own rules against you. Let's talk about the cold reality of the management engine. If you have an Intel processor, you have a second, smaller computer living inside your main CPU. It is called the Intel Management Engine, or ME. It has its own operating system, its own networking stack, and it has total, unfettered access to everything your main computer does. It is designed for remote administration by IT departments, allowing them to fix computers even when they are turned off. But here is the terrifying part. The ME runs at a level far below your antivirus, far below your operating system, and even below your BIOS. If someone finds a vulnerability in the ME, they have a God mode backdoor into your system that you can neither see nor remove. Over the years, several massive flaws have been found in the ME, like the Silent Bob is silent exploit. While Intel pushes firmware updates, most home users never install them because BIOS updates are risky and complicated. Even worse, many of these fixes are just locking certain doors while leaving the master key under the mat. Because the source code for the ME is proprietary and closed, security researchers are constantly playing a game of cat and mouse with a black box that controls our entire digital life. AMD has a similar system called the Platform Security Processor, or PSP, which has its own history of unpatched or difficult-to-patch flaws. These built-in super users are the ultimate prize for state-sponsored actors, and they are effectively permanent features of modern silicon. Now, let's look at the world of USB and the exploit known as bad USB. We have been taught since the 90s not to open weird email attachments, but we still trust physical devices. When you plug in a USB thumb drive, your computer asks the device, "What are you?" The device might say, "I'm a mass storage drive." But with bad USB, the firmware of the USB controller chip is rewritten. The device can tell your computer, "I am a keyboard." Once your computer trusts it as a keyboard, the device can type any command at thousands of words per minute. It can open a terminal, download a virus, and execute it before you even realize what is happening. The reason this is still a massive problem is that it isn't a flaw in the USB protocol. It is a feature. The USB standard was designed for plug-and-play convenience, not for trust verification. To fix this, we would have to change how every USB device on the planet identifies itself, requiring a cryptographic handshake that would make your old mouse and keyboard obsolete. Because the vulnerability lives in the controller firmware, which is often not even erasable or updatable on cheap devices, bad USB remains a powerful, unfixable ghost in the machine. A simple discarded flash drive in a parking lot is still one of the most effective ways to breach a high-security facility. One of the most persistent and powerful exploits that people rarely talk about is BGP hijacking. The Border Gateway Protocol is the GPS of the internet. It tells routers how to find the best path to reach a specific IP address. But BGP was built in an era when the internet was a small club of trusted researchers. There is no built-in way to verify that a network is actually who it says it is. Every few months, we see a mistake where a major ISP in a foreign country suddenly claims to own the traffic for Google, or a major cryptocurrency exchange, or even the US Department of Defense. When this happens, all that traffic is routed through the hijackers' servers. They can perform a man-in-the-middle attack, sniffing the data, or simply dropping it to cause a massive outage. While there are efforts like RPKI to add security to BGP, adoption is slow and voluntary. The internet is literally a network of networks, and as long as some of those networks are untrusted or poorly configured, the very routes your data takes can be stolen at the architectural level. It is a fundamental flaw in the design of the global web that hasn't been truly fixed in 40 years. Moving into the world of identity, we have to address the NTLM relay attacks. In a Windows environment, NTLM is an old authentication protocol used to log you into network shares and printers. It is ancient, but it is still everywhere because of the need for backward compatibility. An attacker on a network can trick a computer into sending its NTLM credentials to a rogue server, which then relays those credentials to a legitimate server to gain access as that user. Despite Microsoft practically begging companies to move to the more secure Kerberos protocol for over a decade, NTLM is like a stubborn weed. It is deeply integrated into how legacy office equipment and old servers talk to each other. Disabling it completely often breaks an entire company's infrastructure, so it stays active, providing a permanent, well-documented path for attackers to move laterally through a network. Then there is the issue of supply chain poisoning in the world of open source. We all use libraries and packages in our code, NPM for JavaScript, PyPy for Python, or Cargo for Rust. Hackers have started using typo squatting. They will upload a malicious package named request instead of requests. If a developer makes a typo, they accidentally install a backdoor into their application. But even crazier is dependency confusion. An attacker finds the name of a private, internal package used by a big tech company and uploads a higher-versioned malicious package with the same name to a public repository. The company's automated build systems will often default to picking the newer public version, effectively hacking themselves. This is a flaw in how package managers work, and while some improvements have been made, the fundamental trust model of download and run code from the internet is a permanent vulnerability that we accept for the sake of speed and innovation. Let's dive into the world of UEFI and bootkits. Your computer's BIOS, now called UEFI, is the first piece of code that runs when you press the power button. It sets up the hardware and hands over control to the operating system. If an attacker can get their code into the UEFI, they have achieved the ultimate persistence. They can survive a hard drive wipe, an operating system reinstall, and even a BIOS update in some cases. Vulnerabilities like Black Lotus and Cosmic Strand have shown that secure boot, the system meant to prevent this, can be bypassed by using old, leaked signing keys. The problem is that once a signing key is leaked or a legitimate but buggy driver is signed by a trusted authority like Microsoft, it stays trusted forever, unless it is manually revoked in a forbidden signature database or DBX. However, the DBX has limited storage space on the motherboard. We are reaching a point where there are more bad keys than there is space to store the revoke list. This means we are effectively stuck with a hardware-level trust system that is slowly but surely being outpaced by the hunters who have stolen the keys to the castle. One of the most powerful and unpatchable exploits in the mobile world involves the baseband processor. Your smartphone actually has two main chips: the application processor, which runs your apps and your OS, and the baseband processor, which handles the cellular connection to the towers. The baseband processor is a complete black box. It runs proprietary code that hasn't changed much since the 80s, and it is incredibly complex. Researchers have found that you can send specially crafted radio packets from a fake cell tower, a stingray device that can cause a buffer overflow in the baseband, giving the attacker total control over the phone's microphone and GPS without the main OS ever knowing. Because this code is owned by companies like Qualcomm and MediaTek and is highly secretive, it is almost never audited by independent security experts. It is a massive, permanent invisible layer of our phones that is constantly listening to the radio waves, and it is one of the most powerful tools in the arsenal of modern surveillance. We also have to consider the side-channel attacks that come from the most unexpected places. Recent research has shown that you can listen to what a computer is doing by analyzing the coil whine, the high-pitched noise the power regulators make on the motherboard. By using a sensitive microphone or even a smartphone placed near a laptop, an attacker can distinguish between different RSA keys being processed based on the subtle changes in the electrical frequency noise. There are also video side channels, where the tiny LED on a computer monitor or a keyboard can be used to exfiltrate data. If an attacker can get a small bit of malware to blink that LED at a frequency the human eye can't see but a high-speed camera can, they have an air-gapped data bridge. These are unfixable because they are the result of the laws of physics. Electricity makes noise, and signals create light. As long as our computers are physical objects in the real world, they will always leak information through these side channels. Now, let's talk about the default credential crisis in the Internet of Things, or IoT. This sounds like an easy fix. Just change your password, right? But it is actually a systemic, unfixable exploit. There are millions of smart cameras, routers, and industrial sensors that are hard-coded with admin or root password. In many cases, these passwords cannot be changed because they are part of the system-on-a-chip configuration. Even when they can be changed, most of these devices have no mechanism for automated updates. They are zombie devices that will stay on the internet for decades until they physically break. This is how the Mirai botnet was able to take down the entire US East Coast internet in 2016. It didn't use any fancy hacks, it just knocked on millions of digital doors and asked, "Is the password admin?" And millions of doors opened. This is a massive, permanent liability that we have built into the very fabric of our smart world. There is also the time of check to time of use, or TUTO exploit. This is a race condition flaw that exists in almost every multitasking operating system. A program checks if a file is safe to open, and for a split second after the check but before the actual use, an attacker swaps the safe file with a malicious one. This is a fundamental result of how computers manage multiple tasks at once. While we have locks and mutexes to prevent this, they are notoriously difficult for programmers to implement correctly. In a complex system like a web server or a kernel, these tiny windows of opportunity are everywhere. They are like cracks in a sidewalk. You can fill them, but as the ground shifts and the system grows, new ones will always appear. One of the most powerful and lasting exploits in the world of web security is insecure deserialization. When a website wants to save the state of your session, it serializes your data into a string of text. When you come back, it deserializes that string back into a live object in its memory. If an attacker can manipulate that string, they can trick the server into creating a malicious object that executes code when it is loaded. This was the root cause of the massive Equifax breach that exposed the data of millions of people. Despite being one of the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities for years, it keeps happening because it is a fundamental part of how modern, distributed web applications work. Programmers want to pass objects around between different servers, and as long as they do that, the risk of deserializing a Trojan horse will always exist. It is a flaw in the logic of modern web architecture itself. While we are on the web, we have to talk about cross-site scripting, or XSS. This is the exploit that will not die. It involves injecting a small piece of JavaScript into a website that then runs in the browser of other users. It can be used to steal session cookies, bypass two-factor authentication, or even redirect you to a fake login page. Even though we have content security policies and modern frameworks designed to prevent this, the web is built on the idea of mixing data and code, HTML and JavaScript. This fundamental mixing is a permanent design flaw. As long as browsers are designed to execute code that comes from a server, there will always be a way to trick them into running the wrong code. Let's look at a very specific and powerful exploit called juice jacking. You are at the airport. Your phone is dying and you see a free USB charging station. You plug in, thinking you are just getting power. But a USB cable has 4 wires, 2 for power and 2 for data. A malicious charging station can use those data wires to pair with your phone, download your photos, or install a monitoring profile. Even though Apple and Google have added "trust this computer" prompts, hackers have found ways to bypass these through video jacking, using the HDMI over USB capability to record your screen while you type your passcode. Because the USB port is a universal port for both power and data, it is a permanent physical vulnerability. The only true fix is a USB condom, a small adapter that physically cuts the data wires. But most people will never use one. One of the most profound and unfixable exploits in the world of networking is the reflection attack in DNS and NTP. These protocols are stateless, meaning they don't require a handshake. An attacker can send a tiny request to a DNS server but spoof the return address so it looks like it came from the victim. The DNS server then sends a massive, amplified response to the victim. This allows an attacker with a small amount of bandwidth to overwhelm a massive target. Because DNS and NTP are the core utility protocols of the internet and must stay fast and simple, we cannot easily add a handshake to them without breaking the entire web. This makes the internet's own infrastructure a permanent weapon that can be used for massive denials of service. Finally, we have to address the human exploit, social engineering. You can have the best encryption, the most secure hardware, and the most patched software. But if an attacker calls your support desk and pretends to be a frantic executive who lost their password, they can bypass everything. This is how the Lapsus Group and the Scattered Spider Group have breached some of the most secure companies in the world recently. They don't use 0 days, they use zero empathy. They exploit the human desire to be helpful and the tendency to take the path of least resistance. This is the ultimate unfixable exploit. As long as computers are operated by humans, the human API will be the most vulnerable part of the system. So where does this leave us? Is everything broken? In a way, yes. We have built a world on top of a technological debt that is starting to come due. As we pushed for more speed, more convenience, and more connectivity, we ignored the fundamental flaws in our architecture. Spectre, Meltdown, Rowhammer, and the management engine are just the physical symptoms of a deeper reality. The machine is a collection of trade-offs. We chose performance over security, and now we have to live with the consequences. The exploits that haven't been fixed are the ones that remind us that perfect security is a myth. Security is not a state of being. It is a constant process of mitigation. We have to assume that the hardware is compromised, that the network is untrusted, and that the users are fallible. This is why we move toward defense in depth, stacking enough layers so that even if one unfixable exploit is used, the attacker is still stopped by the next layer. But for those of us who love computer knowledge, these exploits are also a source of fascination. They show the incredible ingenuity of the human mind. The fact that someone figured out they could hammer a memory chip to flip a bit or listen to a CPU's coil whine to steal a key is a testament to the fact that there is always more to discover. The machine is not a magical box. It is a physical entity governed by the laws of science. As we move toward the future, we might see a great reset in hardware design. We see the rise of RISC-V and open-source hardware where every gate can be audited. We see new programming languages like Rust that prevent entire categories of memory flaws at the compile level. We are learning from our mistakes, but the billions of vulnerable devices already out there mean that the exploits of the past will be with us for a long, long time. So, stay curious, keep your systems as updated as possible, and remember that the most powerful tool in your security arsenal is not a piece of software. It is your own understanding. The more you know about how the unfixable flaws work, the better you can design your systems to be resilient. The digital world is a place of infinite possibility, but it is also a place of hidden shadows. By shining a light on these powerful exploits, we can at least see what is lurking in the dark. Keep digging into the code, keep exploring the silicon, and as always, keep your guard up. The machine never sleeps, and neither do the ghosts that live inside it. The war for the future is being fought one bit flip at a time, and the more we know, the better chance we have of staying on top of it. Stay vigilant, because the cracks in the foundation are exactly where the real action happens.